Hello, and welcome to Roger's Readings. Yes, this is a recorded show. I'm not actually here. No, I'm not. But I thought I would record this Paddington story for you today because it is Paddington Monday. So welcome to the show. Sorry I won't be able to say hello to you when you pop up because this isn't a live show. But hello! And welcome to the show. Right, yes, we have a Paddington story. And, of course, little fellow's here. Give you a little wave. And the story comes from Paddington Here and Now. And the story is called Paddington Takes the Biscuit. So, a quick slope. If you are sitting comfortably, then I shall begin. Let's bring that off in a little bit. That's better. Yes, I can see you now. Yes. Paddington Takes the Biscuit. One morning, the Brown family was about to sit down to breakfast as usual, when Mr. Brown noticed something strange going on in the garden. "What is Paddington up to?" he said, as a familiar figure in a duffel coat dashed past the French windows. "That's my best broom he's got hold of." "Perhaps he's sweeping up," said Jonathan. "It looks as though he's got a book of instructions." "Even Paddington can't need instructions to sweep the patio," said Mr. Brown. "Besides, it's my lawn broom. It's a special one made of twigs." "Quick!" cried Judy, as a shadowy figure shot past, heading back the way it had come. "There he goes again!" From the brief glimpse they had, it looked as though Paddington was trying to keep the business end of Mr. Brown's broom between his legs with one paw, whilst at the same time wave a book up and down with his other, not unlike a bird that has fallen out of its nest and was learning to fly. A moment later, there was a loud clatter from somewhere outside, and a dustbin lid rolled slowly past the French windows. Jonathan jumped to his feet. "Sounds as though he's had a crash landing!" he cried. "Are you surprised?" asked Judy. "He had his eyes closed." "It isn't like him to go rushing around the garden before breakfast," broke in Mrs. Brown. "I do hope he's all right." "He was as right as rain when he went to bed last night," said Judy. "I met him on the landing. He was going to do his accounts." "Perhaps he has found he's overdrawn," said Mr. Brown. "I'd better have a quick word with him out after breakfast." Mrs. Bird gave a snort as she came into the room carrying a coffee pot. "There's nothing wrong with that bear's accounts," she said. "If you ask me, he is planning something. Earlier on he was asking me if I had any pumpkins." "Shh!" said Mrs. Brown. "Here he comes." The Browns were only just in time. They had scarcely settled down, trying to look as though butter wouldn't melt in their mouths, when Paddington entered the room. After mopping his brow several times with a napkin, he joined them at the table, and while he was unscrewing the lid of the marmalade jar, they managed to get a closer look at his book. Most of the cover was filled with the silhouette of an elderly lady astride a broomstick. The pointed hat she wore matched her shapely pointed nose as she hovered above a row of chimney pots. Far from being called "Teach Yourself to Fly," the book bore the words "Everything you need to know about witches, warlocks, and hobgoblins." Mr. Brown gave a groan. "Oh, of course. It's October the 31st. "Halloween," said Judy. "Trick or treat time," added Jonathan. Paddington spread a liberal helping of marmalade on his freshly buttered toast. Mr. Gruber lent it to me, he explained. I haven't read anything about warlocks or hobgoblins yet, but there's a very good chapter on witches and making masks, and there's another one telling you how to decorate a patio using lanterns made out of hollowed-out pumpkins. They're called jack-o'-lanterns, and if you put a lighted candle inside, they keep away evil spirits. There's another chapter on superstitions, he continued. It says if you take a 3-legged stool and sit at some crossroads while the church clock strikes midnight, it will tell you the name of all those who will die during the next 12 months. Oh, very cheerful, I must say, said Mrs. Bird. I know one thing. Anyone who sits on a stool near our crossroads at midnight could well up on top of the list. All the same, Paddington's enthusiasm was infectious, and as soon as the rest of the family finished their meal, they gathered round his chair. I've never been to a Halloween party, he said wistfully. I don't think they have them in darkest Peru. Mrs. Brown caught her husband's eye. We haven't had one in ages, Henry, she said. It might be fun. Please, Dad, chorused Jonathan and Judy. Mr. Brown weakened. Perhaps a small one, he said. Just for the family, but no more. It's bad enough as it is, with all those people ringing the front doorbell and calling trick or treat through the letterbox. The only time I didn't answer it last year, we lost our dustbin lid. I did find it in the canal, said Jonathan. I'll get some chocolate bars in, said Mrs. Brown hastily. They always go down well. Paddington turned over the page. There's a recipe for a witch's brew, he read. It's called stir-fly, and it sounds very interesting. I think you just meant stir-fry, dear, said Mrs. Brown, unless, of course, it's a misprint. Jonathan took a closer look. No, he said firmly. Paddington's right. It is stir-fry. Fly. I got it wrong. It gives the recipe, announced Paddington, reading from the book. It's a mixture of toenail clippings, bat's blood, and dead flies. Charming, said Mr. Brown. I can't wait. They're not real, piped up Judy, seeing the look on everyone's face. You can make pretend toenail clippings out of pieces of chicory, and for the flies, all you need is some old currants that have gone hard. Mix it all up together with tomato ketchup, and Bob's your uncle. Bob's welcome to it, whoever he is, murmured Mr. Brown. I'm not sure I wouldn't prefer the real thing. Look, said Jonathan, gazing over Paddington's shoulder. There's something here about taking a kipper to bed with you. That's another good chapter, said Paddington knowledgeably. I read it under the eiderdown last night. It says, if you take a kipper to bed and eat it before you go to sleep, the person you are going to marry will bring you a glass of water during the night to quench your thirst. Said Mrs. Bird. I hope whoever it turns out to be is prepared to wash the sheets in the morning. That's all I can say. Anyway, said Judy, you don't think you're getting married, are you? I might do, said Paddington darkly. There is another way, he continued. It says here, if you cut the letters of the alphabet out of some newspaper headlines and float them in a bowl of water, they'll spell out the name for you. Mr. Brown pointedly glanced at his watch and then reached for his morning paper. I think it's time I went to the office, he said. It's a bit early in the day for origami. What a bit of luck, it's half-term, said Jonathan, after Mr. Brown had said his goodbyes. We can help get everything ready." "If I were you, Paddington," said Mrs. Bird, "I'd get down to the market as soon as possible. Once people begin to realise what day it is, there could be a run on pumpkins." She reached for her handbag. "While you're there, you can get a box of night lights to go inside them." "Don't forget, we need some chicory for the toenails," said Judy. Paddington made a note of it, and in no time at all he set off with his list, leaving Jonathan and Judy to start making masks. "Very wise," said Mrs. Bird approvingly when she saw what they were up to. "Speaking from experience, that bear and glue pots are best kept as far apart as possible. He can help me with the pumpkin when he gets back." "I don't think Paddington was serious about getting married, do you?" asked Judy when she and Jonathan were on their own. "I can't picture him carrying anyone over the threshold, if that's what you mean," said Jonathan. "He's bound to drop them or else get stuck halfway through the door. Besides, he's got to find someone first." "It's hard to picture anyone wanting to share kippers in bed with him," said Judy, reaching for the paint. "It would be a bad start to married life. I think we're fairly safe." By the time Paddington got back from the market, they had both made so many masks it was hard to find anywhere to sit. Having tried his paw unsuccessfully at painting one while standing up, Jonathan suggested he might look in the garage for some old pieces of frayed rope so that he could make a wig for himself. Mrs. Bird set to work hollowing out the pumpkins, and as soon as that job was done, having left Jonathan and Judy to put the night lights inside them, she turned her attention to the cooking, leaving Paddington to look for some way of dyeing his wig black. One way or another, everyone was kept busy, but if the first half of the day passed quickly, waiting for it to get dark seemed to take forever. In order to pass the time, Paddington retired to his bedroom to write some Halloween poems while he was trying out his costume. "I'm ready for the trick-or-treat part," he announced when he came back downstairs at long last. With the addition of a black pointed hat, similar to the one on the cover of Mr. Gruber's book, everyone agreed he made a very good witch indeed. The finishing touch was a set of white fangs Judy had made for him out of some orange peel turned inside out. "I wouldn't like to meet you on a dark night," said Jonathan when they went out in the front garden. "I thought perhaps we would start with Mr. Curry's, as it's the nearest," said Paddington. "Do you think that's wise?" asked Judy. "I've written a special poem for him," said Paddington. "I don't want to waste it." "You must like living dangerously," said Jonathan. "I doubt if you'll get anything out of him. It would be easier to get blood out of a stone." "Pigs might fly," agreed Judy. "I don't suppose he'll recognise me in my outfit," said Paddington optimistically as he set off through the front gate, leaving the others to hide behind the fence. "I wouldn't bank on it," called Jonathan, but he was too late, for Paddington was already out of earshot. Having pressed Mr. Curry's bell push several times, bring, 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 he hid in the shadows, carefully keeping the lantern behind him so that his face wouldn't show. "Yes!" barked the Brown's neighbour as he opened the door of refraction and peered through the gap. "Who is it?" "Hurry, hurry, Mr. Curry," called Paddington, disguising his voice. "Give me a gift, and I'll be swift." "Go away, bear!" exclaimed Mr. Curry. "How dare you? Any more of that nonsense, and I shall call the police." And with that, he slammed the door in Paddington's face. "That settles it," said Jonathan when he heard what had happened. "It's time for tricks, not treats. I found a good one in your book while you were in the garage this morning. You tie one end of a length of cord to someone's front door, then you tie it tight and tie the other end to a convenient tree. After that, you ring the front doorbell and hide. If it's done properly, when they try to open the door, they think it's stuck. I brought some cord in case it was needed." "It'll serve him right for being so mean," said Judy. "I'll do it," said Paddington eagerly. "Bears are good at knots." He seemed so keen on the idea the others didn't have the heart to say no. Instead, they kept watch while he hurried back to Mr. Curry's house, armed with the cord. Tying it to the doorknob took rather longer than he had bargained for, especially as he was trying to do it as quietly as possible, and it wasn't until he looked round for something he could tie the other ends to that he realised that Mr. Curry's front garden was like the proverbial desert. There wasn't a sign of a convenient shrub, let alone a tree. Paddington was about to go home and ask Jonathan's advice when the door suddenly opened. "Who's that rattling my letterbox?" barked Mr. Curry. "I might have known," he growled when he caught sight of Paddington hiding behind his pumpkin. "Up to your tricks again, Bear?" "Oh, no," said Paddington hastily. "They're not my tricks, Mr. Curry. They're in Mr. Grouper's book. I mean—" The Brown's neighbour stared at him suspiciously. "What's in your paw?" he demanded. It's my jack-o'-lantern," explained Paddington. He held up the pumpkin for Mr. Curry to see. "It's supposed to frighten off evil spirits, but it doesn't seem to be working very well," he broke off as he caught sight of the look on the other's face. "I meant what's in your other paw," barked Mr. Curry. "The one behind your back." And before Paddy could stop him, he had grabbed hold of the cord. I wouldn't pull that if I were you, Mr. Curry," said Paddington anxiously. "Nonsense!" barked the Brown's neighbour. "There's only one way to find out where something goes. That's to give it a good tug." And without further ado, he wound the cord around his other hand and pulled. There was a loud bang as his door slammed shut. It was followed almost immediately by the sound of a tinkling as a metal object landed on the path at their feet. Mr. Curry stared at it. "That looks like a doorknob," he growled. "Have you any idea how it got there, Bear? Might have caused a nasty accident." Paddington held out his lantern and took a closer look. I don't think it's one of ours, Mr. Curry," he said. "Mrs. Bird always keeps our doorknobs polished." "That still doesn't explain what it's doing there," growled Mr. Curry. I was looking for a convenient tree," explained Paddington. "I don't have any trees," growled Mr. Curry. "Nasty, untidy things, dropping their leaves everywhere." "I know," said Paddington unhappily. "That's why the doorknob trick didn't work properly. Yours must have fallen off by mistake. It wasn't meant to." "I'll give you tricks, Bear," barked Mr. Curry. "They ought not to be allowed. If I had my way, I'd—" He broke off. "Would you mind repeating what you just said?" Mr. Curry's face had grown purple with rage. In fact, Paddington didn't like the look of it at all, and he hastily lowered his lantern to be on the safe side. "If you don't mind," he said, "I'd rather not." But the Brown's neighbour was already doing it for himself. Are you trying to tell me that that's my doorknob? He spluttered, clearly hardly able to believe his eyes, let alone his ears. He gazed at his front door, then looked at the end of the cord tied around the knob. Do you realise, he bellowed, you've locked me out of my own house? No, Mr. Curry, said Paddington, glad to be on the firm ground at last. I didn't lock you out. You did it yourself. It's what Mrs. Bird calls a self-inflicted wound. She often says you're very good at those. Raising his hat politely, he looked anxiously over his shoulder, but Jonathan and Judy were too well hidden to be of any help. I think I'd perhaps better go now, he said. We're having a Halloween party, and I don't want to be late. Mr. Curry paused from whatever it was he had been about to say, and a cunning gleam came into his eyes. Is that so, Bear? He said. I thought I saw you doing a lot of coming and going this morning. There was a lot to get ready, said Paddington, only too pleased to change the subject. Mrs. Bird's been very busy, baking cakes and making some special stir-fry mixture. Seeing that I've been locked out of my house, said Mr. Curry, it couldn't have happened at a better time. It's very kind of you to invite me, Bear. Unless, of course, he added meaningfully, you would rather I told the Browns what you've done. Jonathan stood up. Oh, that's told it, he said gloomily, overhearing the conversation. Wait until Dad hears what's happened. He won't be pleased. Mr. Curry is the last person he'll want to see when he gets home. Paddington wasn't joking when he said bears aren't good at knots, agreed Judy. How's he going to get out of this one? I bet he finds a way, said Jonathan loyally. He usually comes out on top. Quick slap. Mr. Curry gazed round the Browns' living room as he made himself comfortable in Mr. Brown's favourite armchair. Having helped himself liberally to a bowl of chocolates, he gave a shiver and then stood up. I think I'll move nearer to the fire, he said. I got cold standing outside. Much to everyone's dismay, he looked all set for the rest of the evening. Now, Bear, he said, addressing Paddington, it's my turn. Seeing you have kindly invited me to your party, I have a poem for you. You mentioned something just now about having some stir-fry. So first of all, trick or treat, give me some of that to eat. Mrs. Bird pursed her lips. Before she had time to say anything, Paddington jumped to his feet. Oh, don't worry, Mrs. Bird, he called as he hurried out of the room. Leave it to me. It wasn't long before he returned carrying a large bowl and a spoon on a tray. Mr. Curry scooped up the last of the chocolates and placed them inside his jacket pocket before turning his attention to Paddington's offering. You cannot say I do not try, said Paddington. I'll give it to you. Then I must fly. Thank you, Bear, said Mr. Curry, licking his lips. And without further ado, he grabbed the spoon and began attacking the bowl. Paddington waited until the Brown's neighbour had finished his second mouthful and was visibly slowing down. I'm afraid it's a bit chewy, he said. It's a special Halloween recipe. Most unusual, said Mr. Curry. I've never had anything quite like it before. Aren't you having any, Bear? I don't think so, Mr. Curry, said Paddington. Thank you very much. My Aunt Lucy always told me never to swallow flies. It's a bit difficult in darkest Peru. They have a lot of them there. She had to keep her jars covered whenever she was making marmalade in case some went in. They're supposed to make you go thin. Mr. Curry gave a snort. "Nonsense," he barked. "That's an old wives' tale if ever I heard one. Besides, what's that got to do with—" He broke off, the spoon halfway to his mouth. "Why are you telling me that, Bear?" "I thought you might be interested," said Paddington innocently. "I did give you the bowl a good stir before I brought it in." Mr. Curry jumped to his feet. "Bear!" he bellowed. "Are you trying to tell me I've been eating stirred flies?" "May I get you another helping?" asked Mrs. Bird sweetly before Paddington had a chance to answer. "No, you may not!" Blah! spluttered Mr. Curry, clutching his stomach. He let out a loud groan. "Oh, that's the very last time I accept an invitation to one of your parties, Bear." "Could we have that in writing?" murmured Jonathan, fortunately not loud enough for anyone other than Judy to hear. "Accept an invitation, indeed," said Mrs. Bird. "I heard you browbeating Paddington just now. As for being locked out of your house, you know very well we keep a spare key for you in case of an emergency. Come with me." And while Paddington took the remains of Mr. Curry's soup into the kitchen, Mrs. Bird led their uninvited guest into the hall. Moments later, for the second time that evening, the sound of a front door being slammed echoed round Windsor Gardens. "Who would have believed it?" said Mrs. Brown. "I told you Paddington would find a way," said Jonathan. "Still waters run deep," said Judy. "There's nothing still about that bear's waters," said Mrs. Bird as she came back into the room. "If you ask me, there's a lot goes on under that hat we don't know about." "Would anyone else like any stirred flies?" she asked. "Or would you prefer pumpkin soup? I made it specially. You can't make lanterns without having lots of the inside fruit left over." "It's very good," said Paddington, licking his lips as he arrived back from the kitchen. "I've just been testing it." "In that case," said Mr. Brown, "come on, everyone, it's party time." Afterwards, they all voted it was the best soup they'd had for a long time. "Aren't you going to take your hat off, Paddington?" asked Mrs. Brown when it was time to go to bed. "If you don't," said Mrs. Bird, "the glue may melt during the night, and then you'll be stuck with it." Paddington considered the matter for a moment or two before he went upstairs. He felt very torn. "I suppose I'd better," he said at long last. "Otherwise I shan't be able to raise it if I meet someone I know when I'm out shopping. But if you don't mind, I'll take my lantern with me while the night light is still burning. It's been such a nice Halloween. I don't want to miss a minute of it." "I know I've said it before," said Mrs. Bird as Paddington disappeared up the stairs, "but I'll say it again. That bear takes the biscuit." Bless him. Bless Paddington. We do love our Paddington. Right. And I have a poem to finish off with, which I hope you will enjoy. It is called... it doesn't actually have a title. We'll call it Balloon, and it's by O. Neal. "I wonder how much air there is in this balloon," said my brother. "Well, burst it and see," I said. "But then the air will escape," he said, him being a year and 1 month older than me. "No, it won't," I said. It will still be in the room, and you can always get it back again by blowing up another balloon. No, that's rot, he said. If I burst this balloon, I shall never know how much air was in it. Yes, you will. No, I won't. Yes, you will. No, I won't. I burst his balloon. He cried aloud, Now look what you've done! You've stolen my air! You can always get it back, I said. No, I can't, he moaned. No more balloons. Brilliant, 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 brilliant. Well, that's it for today. I hope you've enjoyed today's recorded Paddington Monday. Tomorrow is Sateri Tuesday, Sateri Pratchett Tuesday. So come on back and we will have a story from the Discworld. Probably finishing off with Sisters. So I will see you tomorrow. Till then, stay safe, stay happy, and stay healthy. Yeah, I've done it the wrong way around, haven't I? Never mind. It's all recorded. Take care. God bless. Bye-bye.